Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are in module 2 and in module 2 we discuss about configure and manage virtual network for Azure administrator, this particular module. And in our last video we have discussed about the planning the virtual network, creating subnet, and we have created the virtual network and see all that things. In this video we are into creating the public IP address. What is public IP address, how we can create it, how we can associate with that resources, and what is the difference between dynamic and static IP, public IP address, how it behaves. All that we will be seeing in this particular video. In the documentation, it starts from creating the public IP address, and so much theory is given over here. We will directly get into the practical. We will create a public IP address, and all this theory we will discuss while creating the public IP address. We are in the Azure portal, and here we can create the public IP address in two ways. Either you can search in the search bar for public IP address, select this, and here you can create a public IP address. While creating the public IP address, it will be an independent, it will be independent, it won't be associated with any resources. So in this way you can create an public IP address, or while creating a resources. For example, when you are creating a virtual machine, then and there you have an option to create the public IP address that will be automatically will be associated with that virtual machine. We will see both the way how to create the public IP address, both the way of creating the public IP address and associate and disassociated that with any resources. Let's independently create a public IP address and associate that with any resources. I'm going to create a public IP address here. Let me click on create. Here you have to select the resource group and the subscription resource group and region, and you will have to name the public IP address. So here in the theory they have mentioned that enter the name to identify the IP address. You can give any name here to identify this IP address, but the things that you remember that the name must be unique which within the resource group you select. In this resource group it should be unique. There should not be any other public IP address with the same name. For example, if you are giving lab public IP, then this name should not be there for any other public IP address in this resource group. This is what mentioned in this particular line. And here you have an option SKU. Select the SKU. SKU of the public IP address including basic or standard. The value must match SKU of the Azure load balancer with the which address is used. By default, here you can see only standard. Presently, you won't be able to see any basics. So I just checked in the documentation they have given there can be basic, including basic and standard, but while creating now I could see only standard. So I searched it in the Google why it shows only the standard. So the answer is that basic SKU public IP address retirement, it is already got retired. Presently there is no basic SKU. It is there, but they are planning to retire it on 13 September 2025. Basic SKU public IP address will be retired in Azure. You can continue using existing basic SKU public IP address until then. However, you will no longer be able to create a new one after 31st March 2025. This is already given in their official document. They are asking us to upgrade basic public IP address to standard SKU in Azure. And how you can do that, they have given in their official documentation. Here in the documentation, they have discussed the difference between the features of basic SKU and standard SKU. As the basic SKU doesn't remain as of now, we will discuss only about standard SKU. IP assignment will be static. If you check it out here, as we are in the IP assignment, there is no dynamic option is not there. Dynamic option was there only with the basic SKU. With the standard SKU, we have only static. This document they have mentioned IP assignment will be static for standard. Basic, it can be static or dynamic. And security, secure by default, close to inbound traffic. Resources, network interface, VPN gateways, application network interface or public standard load balancer. resources. It can be network interfaces or public standard load balancers. Redundancy, zone redundant by default. These are the features of standard SKU given in the documentation. All right, let's proceed further by creating the public SKU. Sorry, public IP address. Availability zone, it can be zone redundant, no zone, or zone redundant. Regional and global options are here. Standard SKU, we do not have an option for dynamic. Routing preference, Microsoft Network or Internet, we select it as Microsoft Network, and we select all other options as it is, and review and create it. So review is going on. It is validating it, and validation got passed. Now I'm going to create an IP public IP address. It got created right now. Let us go back to the resources. Here you could see the public IP in the name of lab PIP, and this is the IP address. It is not associated to none of the devices. So what we can do, we can go back to the virtual machine. What I will do, I will go back to one of the virtual machine, and here you could see a virtual machine in the name of Parivahan. What I will do, I will disassociate its public IP address and will associate newly created public IP address with this virtual machine. Here you could see a public IP address that is associated with this virtual machine. So what I am going to do, I will disassociate this public IP address and will associate our newly created public IP. How we can do that? Let us see. Let us see, here you have an option to disassociate it. So I am going to disassociate it. Let me click on yes. So what happened? This public IP address will be detached, will be disassociated with this virtual machine. Now this virtual machine will not have any public IP address. If you refresh it, if you go back to the virtual machine, Parivahan, and if you check it, you could not see any of the public IP address here. Now let us associate the newly created public IP with this virtual machine. For that, you can go to the public IP address. Let me just go to the public IP address, and let me select the lab public IP address which I created. And here you have the option to associate it. Let me click on associate. Resource type is network interface of that particular virtual machine. Network NIC card. We are going to associate with the network interface with the NIC card of that virtual machine. Let us collect the network interface card details. Let me go here to the virtual machine, here in the network settings. So this is the network interface of this particular virtual machine, Parivahan 232 underscore Z1 primary. So let us go here and select for that. The issue was with the not with the resource group, issue was with the location. The public IP address which we created was in the location of West Europe, and our virtual machine Parivahan hyphen is in Central India. That's the reason why we were not able to associate that with the Parivahan IP. So this time we will create a public IP address on the Central India location, and let's try to associate it. I just click on create, and here instead of region West Europe, I select it as Central India. I select the region as Central India and name it as same like lab and lab PIP, lab public IP address, and all the other things we remain as it is, and let us review and create it. Validation passed. Let me create it again. So the deployment is in progress. The public IP address has been created. Now let's go back to the resource. Here you could see the resource group, location, SKU, IP address, all that you could see here. We are going to associate this particular public IP with the virtual machine Parivahan. We have removed the public IP address from that virtual machine. Now we are associating this public IP address with that virtual machine. Let me select on associate, and here we are associated with the network interface. If you check it out here, now you can see Parivahan 232 underscore Z1. This is the network interface of this machine Parivahan. So we are associating that with Parivahan. Click on OK. It got saved. So it can be in any resource group, but it should be in the same location. If it is in a different location, you cannot associate resources. If the resource in one region and public IP address created in other region, then you cannot associate the resource with the public IP address. We learned that now. Let's go back to the virtual machine and see it. So we go to the Parivahan virtual machine. Here you could see the public IP address now, which is newly created lab PIP. Yes. So in this way, you can associate and disassociate the public IP address to any resources. The other way of using public IP address is that you can create the resource, and while creating the resource, for example, if you are creating a virtual machine, while creating the virtual machine itself, you can associate the public IP. For example, when I am creating a virtual machine here, while I am while I come to this tab, networking, here you can uh, either associate or you can create a new one and associate that with that resource while creating the virtual machine itself. These are the two ways of associating a public IP address with any resources. All right, let's go back to the document and let's see have we missed something. IP address assignment, and there are two type of IP address: dynamic IP address and static IP address. Dynamic address are assigned after public IP address is associated to an Azure resource and is started for the first time. Dynamic address can be changed if the resource such as virtual machine is stopped in the case, deallocated and restarted through Azure. Then dynamic address can change. The address remains the same if the virtual machine is rebooted or stopped from the guest OS. From the inside the virtual machine as an OS like this, when you restart the machine, guest OS, if you are restarting, you don't lose the dynamic address. But from here, from the Azure portal, if you are deallocating or stopping the virtual machine, it may lose the public IP address if you are giving us dynamic address. Static address are assigned when public IP address is created. Static address are not released until public address resource is deleted. Unless we delete that, it will not be released. If the address is not associated to the resource, you can change the assignment method after the address is created. That's all about static and dynamic. We do not have to think about dynamic now because presently we have only standard SKU. Standard SKU automatically provide us the static address. So from September 13th onwards, we have only standard SKU. So we will have, while creating the virtual machine or while creating the public address, it automatically taken as static. That is what this document says. I provide these details as 17/8/2025 in August 17th. It may have changes in the future, but as of now, basic public IP address, they are discontinued on they have discontinued it, they have retired it, and we think they provide only standard SKU, and standard SKU is only having static IP. Now a question arises in our mind: does the cost involved in creating public IP address in Azure? The answer is yes. Creating public IP address in Azure does involve cost, but it depends upon the SKU, whether it is standard or basic. But the cost again depends upon the SKU, standard or basic, or the IP type, whether it is static or dynamic, and how long it's allocated. According to that, cost also vary. If it is dynamic IP, which is only with basic SKU, which is discontinued now, free while not associated but charged when bound to a resource. But this option you can ignore it because presently the basic SKU option is retired in Microsoft as per their official document. Standard IP always build as long as it is reserved, even if it is not in use. Static IPs is reserved IP. That is the reason it is always built as long as it is reserved, even if it is not in use. Thanks for watching. We will meet in the other video. Till then, goodbye.